What's going on, everybody? Jesse here, and welcome back to another episode in the Blueprints to C++ tutorial series. In today's episode, we'll be laying out the foundation of our inventory widget system, implementing a couple key functions, then laying out the primary inventory overlay screen. I'd like to thank the patrons you see listed on the screen. It's because of their support and generosity that I'm able to continue bringing you content. If you have any questions or need any help, leave a comment below or consider joining the Discord server for help from the community. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy it. So we're going to do the widgets, the primary HUD from the original series. We're going to eliminate that. We're going to do some things a little bit differently. We're going to actually have an actual HUD class, and that's going to be kind of our primary communicator between our inventory widgets. So we're going to create that, and we're going to use something similar to the primary HUD. We're going to call it something a little bit differently, but it will essentially act the same way. I'm just trying to refactor it. Whenever you get a chance to update your code, you always want to refactor. I'm sure you've heard me say that before, but it always is worth repeating. So let's just go ahead, and we're going to start out first. Let's go ahead and create some of our C++ classes. So I'm going to open up my content browser, come down here into C++ classes and widgets. And in here, let's go ahead and create a few of our widgets. So I'm going to right click, new class, all classes, user widget. Actually, let's go ahead and go HUD. So here we go. We got just our primary HUD. That's what we want. Select that. Next, I'm going to call this one main HUD. Make sure it's in the widgets. Now this can go into our normal runtime. We don't want to put this in our inventory because or into our plugin because this is going to be something that's dependent on how people want to display their inventory. All right. So main HUD, game runtime, make sure it's in the proper folder and create class. All right. And of course, we're going to get the errors in here. I'm going to come back and worry about this in just a little bit. Let's jump back into the engine and let's go ahead and create another class. I'm going to right click, new C++ class. This will be of type user widget. Come all the way down here. We want to select user widget. Next, I'm going to call this inventory overlay. Again, make sure it's in the game runtime. It is in the proper folder, which is widgets for me. Create class. Next one up, let's go ahead and select user widget again, all classes, user widget. Next, I'm going to name this one inventory slot, game runtime, and widgets folder. Create class. Next, new C++ class. User widget. I'm going to name this one inventory window, game runtime, widgets, create class. And then right click, we got two more to do. Right click, all classes, again, user widget. Next, now this one I'm actually going to call crafting window. I'm going to come in here into widgets, and I'm going to change this to be in the folder crafting that is inside the widgets, game runtime, create class. And lastly, I'm going to create a new C++ class, all classes, user widget. Next, and this one will be called crafting info window. And simply because we haven't fixed the errors yet, the folder doesn't show up in our content browser. So I'm going to add crafting again as a folder and survival runtime. Go ahead and create class. All right, so now I'm going to go through and fix the errors that we have in this. All right, once you have those all done, go ahead and build your project. All right, now that you got that all done, when you load the editor back up, you should now see all your classes in there. So we've got the 4 classes we created here in the inventory. We got our crafting folder and our 2 widgets that we created right there. So we will come back here in just a few minutes. We're going to create a couple of blueprint versions of both our main HUD as well as our inventory overlay. We're going to do a little bit of work in those in blueprints as well as C++. So, but we'll come back and do that as soon as we do the C++. So let's go ahead and head over into your IDE. All right, so let's start here in the main HUD.h. We're just going to set up our properties, our initial properties and functions. So let's create a public section, and in the public section, I'm going to create a variable, which is a T subclass of user widget, and I'm going to call this inventory overlay class. Now we're going to use this in blueprints to identify the blueprint widget of the inventory overlay class. All right. And then next we're going to create a T object pointer. And it's going to be of U inventory overlay. And we're going to do add for declaration. And we'll call this one inventory overlay. This will be the reference to our instantiated or our created overlay widget. And I'm going to initialize this with equals null pointer. And for both these, let's go ahead and create a U property. So U property, this one will be edit anywhere. Now for the next one, U property, and I'm going to do blueprint read only. All right, let's go ahead and create a protected section. This is going to be a T object pointer, and it's going to be of type U input mapping context. We're going to do a for declaration. I'm going to call this player context. Now, if you remember back in the blueprint series, what this is going to end up being for, as well as the next property that we're going to create, is so we can switch, so we can have a player context and we can press buttons regardless if we're in the player controller or if we're in a widget. Because if we go inside the widget and we give the widget control, we're going to lose control of our player context. So we want to initialize a new context. And so we're going to create a couple of them here so that we can switch back and forth between them within the widget class here. Now this is a T object pointer. The next one will be a T object pointer as well, but we will need to set these within the blueprint or we will end up having some errors. So let's go T object pointer, U input mapping context, and this one I'll call widget context. Let's give them both a U property. This will be blueprint read only and edit anywhere. I'm just going to copy this whole thing and then paste it here for the other one. So let's go ahead and create a couple class members. Come down, let's create a public section, add a void open inventory. And we're just taking some of these that were in the primary HUD. A lot of the functionality that we have in the current primary HUD of the Blueprint edition, a lot of this functionality is going to end up coming over here to the HUD. We're also going to move some of the functionality from the player to this HUD as well. So this will be an open inventory, and we're going to need a U inventory component, add a for declaration, and I'm going to make it a pointer and call it inventory. We're going to need a second argument of U inventory component pointer. I'm going to call this one secondary inventory. Now I'm going to initialize this one to be a null pointer. So we don't need to include by initializing the second argument there. That means that when we call open inventory, all we're forced to do is include the very first argument inventory. If we don't enter the second one, then that's fine. It's already initialized and it's going to be initialized to null pointer. So what we're going to do with this is when we call, if we have a second inventory, so when we're opening a storage unit, when we open that, then we're going to pass the storage unit as a second inventory, and it's no longer going to be null. So we're going to use this to check if second inventory is null, then we're going to end up opening up the crafting window. But if it's not null, then we will end up opening up the second inventory. Next up, let's go void close inventory, and we don't need any arguments for this one. Next up, void update inventory slot. We need an U inventory component. It's going to be pointer to inventory, and I'm going to make this a const function. And next up, I'm going to do a force inline. It's going to be a bool. I'm going to call it is inventory open, no arguments, and I'm going to make this a const function. And inline, I'm going to give it a return value of inventory overlay is not equal to null pointer. So by calling this function like this, making it a force inline, just wherever we end up using this, it's just going to put the result of this function call in line. So it's going to do that at compile time, and it's just going to insert this code in there for us. And by making this force inline a const, this is also going to allow us to, it's going to make it a pure function in blueprints. There's other ways to make your calls pure. This isn't the traditional way to do it. It just so happens that the way this is set up, it will be a pure function. So let's go ahead and add some U functions. Blueprint callable. I'm going to give it a category of inventory HUD. I'm going to copy this down here for close inventory. It's going to be the exact same. Come down to update inventory slot. It too will have the same U function, and the force inline will also have the same U function. So now I want to come down, last thing here, and create a private section. And in this private section, I'm going to go void add inventory overlay, no arguments, and then void remove inventory overlay. We don't need any EU functions for these. These are private. They can only be called within the main HUD itself, no children, because of the private section right here. So now let's go ahead and create definitions for these. And there we go. We have all our definitions. So let's go ahead and work on the CPP file. All right, so let's go open inventory. And for the open inventory, we're going to go add inventory overlay. So this is going to add the overlay to the screen when we actually code the add inventory, that is. Come down, I'm going to go inventory overlay, and I'm going to go set inventory windows is valid secondary inventory. Now I'm going to go ahead and comment this out because we haven't actually created the set inventory windows function yet. So we're going to get that error right there. We'll go back when we get the inventory overlay in a minute and we will set this function over in there. But for now, I'm just going to comment it out so we don't have the error. Next, let's go update inventory slot. And we're going to update it with the inventory that we are passing in there. Let's go if is valid secondary inventory. So if we do have a secondary inventory, then we want to go update inventory slot secondary inventory. So if we do have one, then we want to update that as well after we open up the inventory. It's going to open up our primary one. It's going to update it. If we have a second one, it'll update it there. If not, then we're going to go else, and we don't have the functionality set up for this yet. So, but I am going to put the else here. I'm going to add a to do. I'm going to go open crafting window here. So this else, so if we don't have a secondary inventory, we want to open up the crafting window, but we don't have that function set up yet. We don't have anything in here for the crafting window yet. So I'm just going to make myself a to-do here in Writer. I have the ability to come over here to my to-do list, select my project or create a scope for my project. And it's going to go through my entire project and find anything I have marked as to do. And there we go. We can see to do open crafting window here. So anything I have marked here is going to show within this scope. So that's just a good way to keep track. And if you're in Visual Studios, then you can still do something like this and then just search for the keyword to do and you should have it. I don't think there's anything quite like this inside of Visual Studios, but you can still get similar results. All right, so now let's go to close inventory. This one's pretty easy here. We're going to end up having to make this a comment as well, but I'm going to go inventory overlay, call a function called show crafting window, and it's going to be false. And then we're going to go remove inventory overlay. So we got the error here. I'm just going to comment it out. We'll come back and uncomment in just a little bit. We don't have anything for update inventory slot yet. We'll hit that a little bit later down the road. But now for adding the inventory overlay, go ahead and make a local variable. I'm going to make it a const, a primary character pointer. I'm going to call it character. And I'm going to go cast a primary character, u gameplay statics. And we're going to call the static function get player character this, comma 0. So we still have the error here. So let's go ahead and add the include here. All right, so now that's included. Head up here. You can see we included the character in the header file there. Then I'm going to create another one. I'm going to create an a player controller pointer, call it controller, and we're going to get owning player controller. Now I'm going to go if inventory overlay class and controller and character and player context and widget context. So we have to have the way it's set up, we have to have the inventory overlay class. We have to ensure that we got the controller, ensure we got the character and that it cast properly. If you named your primary character something a little bit different, then make sure you enter that there. Then we need to make sure we have the player context and widget context. We don't want to do anything in here. We don't want to add this to the inventory screen if any of these are not true. So if it is true, then we go inventory overlay equals create widget, and before the parentheses, I'm going to make it of type inventory overlay, and then inside the parentheses, I'm going to give it the controller and the inventory overlay class. So this is a lot like spawning. So we're creating the widget. The widget's going to be of type inventory overlay, u inventory overlay. And then as you can see here, it asks for an owning object. The owning object will be the controller and then the name of the widget. So that's why we must have this one here is now it's going to take this, the blueprint class of this, and it's going to spawn the widget from that. So that's why it's important that we do it the way we've done it here. Next, we're going to take the controller and call b show mouse cursor equals true. F input mode, we want to set F input mode game and UI. And I'm going to call this input mode. Now this is kind of odd the way that this works. So we're setting a variable called input mode, and it's of type F input mode game and UI, but we're not actually going to initialize this with anything. We don't go equal game and UI. We don't do anything like that here. Just by calling this variable, it's going to know what type it is right here, and this is what's going to end up setting it. So it seems kind of odd, and it is, but that's just the way that it works here. So we're going to go input mode. Now we're setting the input mode dot set widget to focus, inventory overlay, and take widget. So what take widget does is it gets the underlying slate widget or constructs it if it doesn't exist. So we're going to take the widget, which is from the inventory overlay, and that's what we're setting the widget focus to. Next, I'm going to get the character, and we're going to call remove player mapping context, and we're going to remove the player context. Terminate that, get the character again, set player mapping context, and we're going to set the widget context. So the reason for the error here is because we haven't created this function call yet. Remember, this is a function that we did already set over on the player character. So let's go ahead and jump into the player character really fast and create this function so we can get rid of this error. I'm just going to control click on the A primary character, and it's going to take me over here to the definitions. So right here where it says set player context mapping, I'm going to create a new function. It's going to be void remove player mapping context. We're going to pass in a const u input mapping context. It's going to be a pointer mapping context, and it's going to be a const function. And for both of these, I'm going to make them ufunction blueprint callable. And I'm going to copy this and paste it there for the remove player context as well. And let's go ahead and create a definition for that. And this should be relatively simple. So let's go ahead and just set the functionality here for this. Let's go if const a player controller pointer, we'll call it player controller equals get world, get first player controller. So if we successfully get the player controller, let's go if u enhanced input local player subsystem pointer. I'm going to call it subsystem. If it's equal to u local player, call the static function on there, get subsystem. And the subsystem is going to be of type u enhanced input local player subsystem. And then in the parentheses, I'm going to go player controller and call the function get local player. And then because this is an if, hit the brackets and go subsystem remove mapping context. And the mapping context we want to remove is the one we pass in, mapping context. And there we go. So let me go ahead and I'm going to drop this function down so it's a little easier to read. So again, we create a local variable called player controller, and we verify that it's good in the if statement here. So we're just combining setting the variable and the if statement. So we got the player controller. If we end up getting this successfully, then we're going to come in here and we check to see if we have the U enhanced local player subsystem, just like we're doing with the player controller. And we're going to grab it from the U local player, get subsystem. This is the type of subsystem that we want to get. There's several subsystems that each player and controller have. This is the one we're looking for. In order to get it, we have to get the player controller and get the local player. And then if that's successful, then we take the subsystem variable and remove the mapping context, and we're going to remove the one that we passed in. That's it. All right, so let's go ahead and head back over to the made.hud.cpp, and there we go. We should see that the remove player context mapping is now no longer red. So let's finish off this functionality now. So we come down, and I'm going to go controller set input mode, and we're going to pass in input mode, inventory overlay, set user focus. We're going to set the focus to the controller, and then inventory overlay, add to viewport. Then on the if statement, I'm going to go else. I'm going to create a UE log, and I'm going to make it an error with the text. You must set defaults for inventory overlay and contexts. If this isn't true, if nothing in here is true, most likely it's going to be because you either didn't set the overlay class or either of these contexts. It should always grab the controller character. If it's not getting these from the beginning, we got a different issue. So most likely it's going to end up being one of these three that you forgot to set, or all three for that matter. So if that fails, we want to come down here, and the error, I believe this will crash it. It will crash, do a soft crash of the game, but it'll throw the error in the log, and it'll be in red text and tell you you must set defaults for inventory overlay and context. All right, so now let's just go down and finish up the remove inventory overlay. I'm going to go const a primary character, and it's going to equal cast a primary character, u gameplay statics, get player character, this comma 0. This is just because it needs a world context object, and this main HUD counts as a world context object. So now I'm going to go down and go just like we did with the last one. I'm going to go a player controller. We probably could have just went ahead and copied these two functions or these two local variables from the previous function, but it's good practice. A player controller, pointer, controller equals get owning player controller. Now we go if inventory overlay and controller. So essentially all we're checking here is, do we have a valid object inside of our inventory overlay? We don't need to worry about the class or the player context or anything of that, because if we have a valid inventory overlay, then we should already have all those other objects as well, because we're not setting the inventory overlay unless those objects are already set. So if we got that, then we go controller. We need to bring the controller, or we need to hide the mouse cursor again. So b show mouse cursor equals false. This is pretty much just the reverse of what we just did in the add inventory overlay. And then controller, excuse me, I'm going to go const f input game only, f input mode game only, input mode. Hey everyone, Editor Jesse here, and I just wanted to quickly jump in because you may be wondering why we made the F input mode const in the remove inventory overlay function, but not in the add inventory overlay function. If you recall from the fundamentals videos, declaring a function or variable const is essentially making a promise to the compiler that you will not be making any changes to any properties within that function or variable. In the case of the F input mode, this variable is actually a struct denoted by the prefix F. If you look back at the add inventory overlay function, you'll see that after declaring the local variable input mode, we immediately change a value called setWidget to focus that is inside the struct input mode. Therefore, you cannot declare this local variable as a const. In the remove inventory overlay function, we don't need to make any changes to the input mode struct, so we can save ourselves a little bit of processing by declaring as a const, because a const is generated at compile time rather than runtime. Hope this helps, and enjoy the rest of the video. Controller, set input mode to input mode. Now you would think you could just take this right here and paste it into here and it would set it, but in fact it actually doesn't. So that's why we're doing it like this. We're creating a local variable of type input mode game only and then passing it in here as a parameter there. You cannot just call this here. You'll get an error telling you that you can't call the struct in this file because F means this is a struct. So we can't call that inside here. So we have to call the input mode. I'm going to go down. I'm going to go character, remove player context mapping, and we want to remove the widget context, character, set player context mapping, and we want to set the player context. And go down and go inventory overlay. We want to remove from parent, inventory overlay equals null pointer. There we go. We have everything set so far in our main HUD. So make sure you go ahead and build it and make sure everything builds all right. All right. Now that everything built all right, I'm going to head over to the inventory overlay.h and let's go ahead and build up this class. And under the generated body, I'm going to create a public section. Now I'm going to mention here that when it comes to widgets, a lot of things are going to be best set from within the designer area of the widget. It's just, it's there. You should probably do it there. It's very visual when you're creating UIs and UX interfaces. So you should do it there. One of the things I like to do though, even when designing in everything within the blueprint widgets, is I still like to set most of the properties and stuff within C++, because then I can have controls and hooks to them in C++. Here for the inventory overlay, at least initially, a lot of this, we're just going to be setting some of the variables here, and some things we're still going to go ahead and like position these particular objects within the designer. And in future widgets, you're going to see that I'm actually going to do some designing within C++. I'm going to do a lot of the sizes just to show you guys how to do it. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to set the primary objects here within this class, and then we're going to create the blueprint of it, and then we'll place them within the screen there. But again, in the future videos, I will show you guys how to actually do a lot of the manipulation of the widgets from C++. All right. So this first one, I'm going to go T object pointer. It's going to be of type U border and for declaration. I'm going to call this one back border. Next up, T object pointer. This is going to be a U horizontal box for declaration. And I will call this one player inventory spot. T object pointer, U horizontal box, secondary inventory spot, T object pointer, U horizontal box, crafting window box. Now these names that we're setting here for these objects, we will need to have the exact name match within blueprints. Otherwise, they won't bind properly. We're going to create U properties here that are going to force these to bind to the blueprint. So keep that in mind. Whatever you name them here, they will have to be the same in blueprints. T object pointer, U horizontal box, and I'm going to call this one crafting info window box. All the more reason to make sure that you spell it correctly as well. Next up, I'm going to create a T subclass of user widget, and I'm going to call this one inventory slot class. So this making T subclass of, it makes it type safe. If you read the definition here, it's a template that allows U class types to be passed around with type safety. So we're going to define in blueprints that what the inventory slot blueprint class is. It's going to be of type user widget. So it has to be one of these, but this needs to be filled up, and it's going to be of any class of this. We can create our inventory slot class. So we could probably narrow this T subclass down to be of the actual inventory slot class, but I don't want to. I just want to keep it here as that. So that's what the T subclass is for. Another T subclass of user widget, inventory window class. And I've got a couple of these, so I'm just going to copy this, and this will be called crafting window class. And the next one, or the last one, will be the crafting info window class. I'm going to create a T object pointer of type U inventory slot. I'm going to add a for declaration to it and call it inventory slot. So we got some U properties to add here. So this first one, we're going to go U property meta equals bind widget. So I'm going to copy this one. We're going to need this for a few of them for the secondary inventory spot, crafting window box, and the crafting info window box. Then down here for the T subclass, for the inventory slot class, we're going to go U property, edit anywhere, blueprint read only. I'm going to give it a category of inventory, HUD, inventory. So I'm going to copy this down to the inventory window class, and I'm going to paste it. It's going to be the exact same. Now I'm going to come down to the next one. I'm going to paste, but I'm going to change the last inventory into crafting, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I could have copied that, but it's just as fast to come in here and delete and add the word crafting, and then nothing for the T pointer. So now let's create a private section. In here, I'm going to create a T soft object pointer. It's going to be of type U inventory window. We're going to add the for declaration for that. I'm going to call it player inventory window. Create another one, T soft object pointer. Make sure it's the object pointer, not the class pointer. U inventory window. And like I said, make sure it is the object pointer and not the class pointer. And I will call this one secondary inventory window. T soft object pointer, U crafting window for declaration, call it crafting window. And finally, another T soft object pointer is going to be of U crafting info window for declaration and call it crafting info window. So now that we got the property set, let's go ahead and set a couple members. I'm going to create another public section. This first one, let's go. It's going to be a U inventory overlay const F object initializer ampersand object initializer. So we are setting what this is doing. This is setting a constructor. So in widgets, the constructor for widgets are just a little bit differently. We didn't set one in main HUD. We may in the future, but for right now, we didn't need one there. But here we will need the constructor for widgets, and this is how you do it here. So it is of its own type, U inventory overlay. Give it a const F object initializer ampersand pass by reference the object initializer. And I'm going to go ahead and create a comment here. There we go. Next, let's go void update inventory slot. It's going to be of we need an argument of U inventory component for declaration pointer, and I'm going to call it inventory component. And I'm going to make this a U function, and we'll make it blueprint callable. Next, go void set inventory windows. Pass in a const bool called enable secondary window. Another one, void show crafting window. Const bool is enabled, and that should do it for now. So now let's go ahead and create the definitions. So I'm just going to right click, and for me, generate definitions. There's 4 of them to generate. I'm going to select OK. And then now here we are in the inventory overlay CPP. And one thing, if I try to compile this right now, I believe it's going to throw me an error. So in the constructor, we actually need to come up here to the head of the function call, add a colon, and go and call super object initializer. All right. You have to do this here. You can't, like most supers, you can't do it inside of the function call here. You'll get an error. It has to be up here. Not quite sure why. I'm not that far advanced in C++. All I know is that this is how it has to be laid out here. Okay. So we're not going to worry about setting any of these functions at this point. We just got them in line now. So if we come back here to the main HUD CPP, we should be able to uncomment where we were getting the errors. So if we come up here to close inventory, remove that comment, and there we go, show crafting window. And then up here to the open inventory, same thing, remove that comment. We get no error now. And it looks like that is it. Yep, that should be it. So let's go ahead now and jump into the editor and do some settings in there for the inventory overlay. All right, so now that we got that done, let's go ahead and open up the content browser here. And I'm going to come down here to the C++ classes under widgets. And I'm just going to create a couple of these for now. First, let's find the main HUD. I'm going to right click on it and create a blueprint class based on main HUD. And I'm going to call mine BP underscore main HUD. Now I'm not giving it a widget blueprint because the HUD is not a widget. So just a BP underscore main HUD. And I will come down though to the widgets folder. And this is of the main game content widgets folder, not under the plugin C++, and create blueprint class. It's going to open it up. I'm going to close it back down, open up the content browser again, come over here to inventory overlay, right click on that one, same thing, create blueprint class based on this. And this one I will call WBP underscore inventory overlay. And again, I'm going to store it into the same folder there in widgets, create blueprint class. And it's going to open that up as well. I'm going to close that one back down. I'm going to reopen them both up here, show you exactly why I did that. Come over here to the widgets and find the WBP main HUD. And if I open that up, now it's not open up in the blueprint editor and I can make some changes here. So most notably, I'm going to come down here and I need to set these 3 variables here before I forget. The inventory overlay class. I need to go WBP, and then I'm going to select the inventory overlay that we just created, the WBP underscore inventory overlay. Player context, I'm going to open this up, the IM player. Widget context, set that to the IM widget. So these 3 had to be set. Now we got them all set up. No one have to worry about it. Go ahead and save that. And if I open up the content browser again and select the WBP inventory overlay, this is open up. So now let's go ahead. We are in the designer, and in the designer, let's go ahead and lay this out now. So first, I'm going to grab a canvas panel, throw it in here. Now, where I'm getting this from, this is like we designed it in the blueprint class. I'm not going to go over there and look at the values of the original blueprint. I have those already, so I'm just going to put them here and generally lay this out like it was originally before. So nothing I'm doing here with its layout should be a surprise. It's as we did it before. So if you followed along, you should have that. All right, so with that now, we've got that. First thing we need to lay down is a border. So from the comment, I'm going to grab a border, drop it in here in the canvas panel. Now this is our first one. We need to call this one back border. Now, how do I remember what this needs to be called? I'm going to actually remove that and I'm just going to name it something else. If I go to compile this right now, I'm going to get an error. So this pops up here. We require a widget binding called back border, player inventory spot, secondary inventory spot, crafting window box, crafting info window box, and then it repeats itself right in here. So that's all that is right there. So there's the names we have to set, so we don't have to jump back into C++ if we don't want to, but I already know what those are. So I'm just going to come back over here, select the border, call it back border, and then the back border, I'm going to take a blur. I'm just going to search in the palette for a blur. take the background blur and set it inside the background border. And with the background border selected, I'm going to come up here to the anchor, and we're actually going to anchor it over the entire screen just like so. And then with the right offset, we're going to set this to 0, as well as the bottom offset, we're going to set to 0. Padding, I'm going to come down here to the padding. I'm going to give it a padding of 0, come down to brush color, and I'm going to set the color to 0, 0, 0, and the alpha, let's give it about a 25% alpha, and that sets our background right there. So now if I come down to the background blur, I'm going to come up here and set the padding to 0. The blur strength, I'm going to set to about a strength of 5, and there we go. You see it blur up a little bit, and that's about all I'm going to do for that one. So now let's go ahead and drop in 4 horizontal boxes here. I'm going to clear the search, find a horizontal box, and I'm going to drop it right onto the canvas panel. And I'm just going to Control V. There we go. 4 times. We got 4 horizontal boxes. This first one, I'm going to call this Player Inventory Spot. And I'm going to name these. We'll come back and we'll reset these. We'll set all the values for them in just a second. The second one, we're going to call Secondary Inventory Spot. Third one's going to be Crafting Window Box. And the last one, Crafting Info Window Box. All right, so now if we compile, we shouldn't get any more errors with that. It should compile just fine now, assuming you spelled everything correctly. All right, so let's go back to the player inventory spot. With that one, I'm going to keep the anchor on the top left-hand side. We're going to set the position to be 50, the Y position to be 25. And we're not going to worry about the size Y or the size X right here, because we're going to come down to size to content. We're going to select size to content. And it's just going to drop down into a nice little box right there. But we're going to populate, as soon as we populate a widget in here, this will open and expand back up. Okay. So right now we're just setting the content to size right now. So I already visually know what it's going to look like. You can set something in here. You can grab your widget and set it in here if you want to see how it all looks. So, but we don't have those created yet, so we can't really do that at this point. But I'm just going off of what we created in the original Blueprint series. So that's why I'm confident in knowing that that's where they belong. Next up will be the secondary inventory spot. For this one, I'm going to set the anchor to be the top right. I'm going to set the position X to be minus 50. I'm going to set the position Y to be 25. Again, we're not going to worry about the size X and the size Y. I'm going to set the alignment to be 1.0 here. And then that way it's going to just push it off to the left, and size to content. So it's going to drop it there. So with the alignment being a 1+, it's going to expand backwards this way. Now for the crafting window box, this one I'm going to set an anchor to the bottom left. Its position X will be 50. Position Y will be minus 410. Come down and size to content. And that one's good to go. Crafting info window box. This one I'm going to set an anchor to the top center. Set its X position to 0. Its Y position, I'm actually going to give it a Y position of 84. Now the reason for this is because in the player inventory screen, we have the text up top that says your inventory items or whatever it says right there. And that spacing is roughly about 84 pixels. So I'm going to move this down so it matches the same height as the actual inventory window there. So that's where I get that value there. Again, this just comes down to taking all your stuff and populating it in here so you can visually see it, move it, and scale it to however you need it. And then the last thing I'm going to do here for the info window box is see how it's offset here off to the right. It's justified off to the right from the center line. I don't want that, so I'm going to come over here to the alignment, and I'm going to go 0.5. And there we go. You can see it centered it right up there for us. And then I'm going to come over here and hit the size to content. And that's it. I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, please do me a favor, go down and hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe while you're down there liking it. Hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we drop a new video. And until the next time, peace.